So hello again, I'm Andrea, holistic pleasure coach, sex educator based in Kailua, Hawaii. This class is part of my Mindful Sex series. I host these classes monthly as a service offering to the community so that people start talking about these delicious subjects so that people can get to know me and hear how I talk about sex and tantra and pleasure practices and all of that. And also just to create a little bit of a space for us to get together on a Saturday morning or afternoon and just be in our pleasure selves for a little bit. So I'm going to start with a little bit of housekeeping, and then I will do an intro to me. And again, for anybody who dropped in, it's being recorded. Your face will not be on any recording. So we're only letting people in until about 10 after. After that, it's just the cozy group of 20 that are here. So please know that I can't see all of you. So if you have a question, you can use the buttons down below and raise your hand, and then we can call on you, or you can drop something into the chat. And if I miss it, my beloved will remind me that there's something to look at. So you can be video on or video off. I appreciate all of you whose faces I can see. And this is a big group. And again, we had over 80 people register. We have more than 20 people here. So if I miss a question or if I miss your raised hand, I apologize in advance. I will send out emails at the very end, and you are welcome to reach out to me and ask any additional questions you might have. So for the class today, this is G rated. Yes, the recording will be available later, and it'll be on my newly launched Patreon site, which is really exciting. I'll drop the link in a moment. I will be sending a collection of emails to all of you who joined. It's a series of about 3 or 4 emails with practices and Instagram links to my stuff and blog articles and all sorts of stuff that will help you continue on this journey. You can opt out at any time. We're very big on consent around here. And also, I hope you stick around because this is where you get the juiciest, like naughtiest, most delicious information and event invites. Social media is a little bit of a tricky place for a sex educator like myself. That is why I created the Patreon page. I just kind of hard launched it yesterday. So give me one moment and I will drop the link in. And if I'd love for you to check it out, this is where it's really going to be, this is really going to be the repository of my videos, my longer workshops, my worksheets, and all sorts of other stuff that's going to help you on this journey. And it's going to be a great community where we can work and share without censorship, which is so rampant on social media and makes me nervous every time I open Instagram to see if my account has been shut down or shut off in some way. So I am on TikTok, I am on Instagram, I am on Facebook. I will send out all those links in the subsequent emails. And now that most of y'all are here, I want to say welcome again. So in my work as a pleasure coach, I really bridge the spiritual and the practical. I like to think of myself as this Venn diagram of like kind of the hippie, esoteric, ancient wisdom, and also the very practical, therapeutic, scientific, medical research that I bring all of this together to help people better understand their bodies, their pleasure, their relationships, and their connection to the eroticism that is within all of us, that the eroticism in us is really a life force energy. It's not something that we turn on and turn off, more like it's something we tune into, like when we get caught in the current of a river. So my goal as a pleasure coach is to really blow your mind, not because I have any sort of like magic tricks, but because I invite you deeper into yourself and into that innate eroticism, that erotic power that is within you. And again, the river metaphor or the ocean metaphor for those of us that live near the sea is really powerful. When you can get caught in that flow, that is the eroticism that is in you. And I feel like for me, it's like sometimes I can catch it and sometimes I'm a little bit out of sync with it, right? And so you can think of this as the divine, as nature, as eroticism, as sexual energy, whatever kind of languaging works for you. But we're going to talk about how to weave those practices into both your pleasure and your play and also your yoga practice. So the other thing to know about my work is I really approach this meaning pleasure and sex and eroticism as a healing practice. so often in therapy and in kind of self-help realms, we really separate out the sexuality. And a lot of my work I do is with therapists who don't know how to talk about this stuff with their clients because we've really separated out psychotherapy and sex therapy. My beloved Christopher, who's on the call, is a 20-year psychotherapist, and it wasn't until he started doing specifically sex therapy that his practice was able to integrate these for his clients. So I bring in that integrated part. Your sex is not something in addition to your relationship with your partner. It is woven into all of it. And when we say everything's great, but the sex is really tricky, that is still part of the relationship. So I invite you to bring that back in. Last month, I taught a class called the erotic thread, which is, again, how we drop into that connection. And it was a great class. I fucked up the video, so I don't have the video recording of it. And afterwards, my beloved and I were talking and exploring, and we had a beautiful MDMA experience where we really started to understand it in a different way. So I'm going to be teaching that class again in April about the erotic thread. So if you like this and you want to learn more, please join us. That's also to say that this work is my work as well. We are on this path. I am on this path, and there is so much to learn. And every time we make love, every time I self-pleasure, every time we do MDMA, or every time I go for a walk on the beach, there's always these revelations. It's like a big, giant flower opening slowly, and there's more and more and more to discover. So this class today will be an intro to some of these practices, and I invite you to go deeper. There is so much novelty, there is so much wisdom to be found in the depths of your heart and your spirit and your sexuality. So now I want to focus on you. I would love to know, for those of you that are here and are inclined, I'd love to just drop into the chat where you are in the world. We already have somebody from Florida all the way from Hawaii, so we're already spanning the continent and the Pacific Ocean. I'd love to know where you are. There were a bunch of people who reached out from all different parts of the world. So I love always knowing where people are. It also gives me a chance to catch my breath and drink some tea. Atlanta, hi to Atlanta. I just got invited to my cousin's wedding in Atlanta, so we'll be down there soon. Washington, Texas, Massachusetts, Bay Area, New Jersey. I don't know anything about New Jersey, so I won't hold it against you, I promise. Tampa, California. Oh my God, we have everywhere. Longmont, Brooklyn, Mexico City. Gracias for being here. Thank you. And Kauai, of course. Rob, thank you for representing Hawaii and being here from Kauai. And Canada. Hello to our friendly neighbors to the north. And in Berkeley, oh my gosh, I love this so much. This is one of the biggest kind of geographic groups we've had, which is lovely. So thank you, everyone. Thank you for sharing that. And more Canada people. Oh my God, I love this. We were just in Vancouver, and I remember walking around Vancouver and saying to Christopher, like, oh, it just feels so safe here. And even in Hawaii, like it's a pretty safe community, but like there's something about being in Canada. So you guys are doing really great. So thank you for that. Okay, now we're going to talk about sex and yoga. And again, this is an intro. This is kind of like my version of how I understand these things. I am not a yoga teacher. However, I have practiced for more than 20 years. So I've practiced yoga my entire adult life with dozens of different teachers and dozens of different pathways, lots of different types of classes. And I've gone through my own ebbs and flows in my yoga practice. So yoga is kind of my primary embodiment practice, right? I do a little bit of meditation and mindfulness. We practice mindful sex in this household. And I move my body primarily and get into my body primarily through yoga. And as I started to really jump on this path of sexual wellness and Tantra, there really was like these connections that were taking place. And I see more and more similarities. And again, this is not going to be like a whole discussion about like the philosophy of yoga. That's beyond my scope of work. There are beautiful teachers that can speak to that. We'll integrate some of the yoga tools that I understand as I understand them. And we're not going to talk a super in-depth yoga class today. So yoga and sex are two of my favorite things. And they really both bridge the spiritual and the physical. And I know for the first 10 years of my yoga practice, it really was just about like being hot and strong. And I really understand now that that's that's not what it's about. It's really in here and it's in our heads. So the other thing that I like about kind of connecting sex and yoga is that they both really feel better when we go into it with the right attention and when we go into it with the right intention. One of my rules is that I never drive to yoga classes. I always try and go to classes that I can walk to or bike to because it puts me in the wrong headspace, right? I got to rush. I got to get there. I got to rush to go get relaxed in this. It's like totally the wrong headspace. Kind of the same thing with sex. Um, I like to have time and the intention of spaciousness and really be able to put my attention on myself or on my partner as I'm going into it. The other thing that connects yoga and sex is that for the most part, like slower is always juicier. And there's some exceptions, of course, but like generally, I find that the slower you go and the more still you can be, the juicier, the richer, the deeper the practice or the pleasure is going to be. The other thing that connects sex and yoga is really that some of us make it all about the movement, right? We want to think about the motion in the ocean. And really, it's about breath. It's about how connected are you to your breath. And we'll talk a little bit more about each of these kind of themes throughout the next 15, 20 minutes or so. I also want to say that there will be time at the end for some Q&A. So I'll talk for a little bit and then we'll do some Q&A at the end. In the meantime, you can drop questions or thoughts into the chat. So when I think about sex and yoga now, again, it wasn't always like this for me. I started yoga when I was 20. I was a surfer. I was like super interested in like being really strong and making my butt look really big. And it really wasn't until like 10 years ago that I started understanding that there was like a whole lot more to this practice. And it's really given me this foundation of spiritual practice, of embodiment practice, of breath, of attention. And all of these practices that I gained through yoga, I've really been able to integrate into my sex life. And the more I practice these deeper sex practices, the more I'm able to expand my yoga practice, right? So for me, they're kind of intertwined, almost like this double helix of expression. And there's so much similarity. The other thing that I really, really understand now about sex and yoga that I wouldn't have understood at 20 or 30 was that there's no limit to the depth that you can experience. This is what I was saying earlier. It's like this giant flower that just like keeps opening. No matter how many times you've done a yoga pose like downward dog or even child's pose, right? Like the most restorative pose, you can still get something new and beautiful and opening within it. And likewise, whether you're in a long-term partnership or whether you have learned to masturbate the same way for your whole life, there are ways to deepen the relationship, the connection, the pleasure itself. And I just think it's a fascinating opening for all of us. I was listening to a podcast the other day with Layla Martin and Jaya, both of whom are amazing experts in this field. And Jaya was saying, I don't, there's really like, there's no such thing. Like, I don't understand how people get bored sexually because there's so much to explore. And she was saying there's thousands of different ways to explore kink, and there's thousands of different ways to explore tantra, and there's thousands of different ways to explore, more mindful sex and conscious sex and breath work and all of that. And then there's psychedelics and MDMA, and we can just keep adding these things. So there really is no, her understanding was that there's really, when we get bored, it's really a lack of imagination and creativity. So as we think about this class today, I want you to imagine that there's possibilities that we may not yet have conceptualized. So here's some of the other big themes that I think about when I think of yoga and sex. Is really that, again, for me, and I know for a lot of people, yoga is really about performance, right? I started going to sculpt classes a couple of years ago, and I was like, oh, this is like, these people are very intense. And as a person who comes from like a traditional like hatha and vinyasa practice, like being in sculpt was like being at the gym and like being yelled at by a bunch of dudes. And I was like, no, like this is not for me. And it's like the intensity of it, right? Like, can I keep up? Can I lift more weight? Like, can I push myself harder? Can I go faster? Can I flow more? Can I like, stay in my handstand longer than the person next to me? And does everybody approach yoga like this? Of course not. But I have found over the years that I also did that. And I started to remove that kind of performance aspect to my yoga class. and I became a much deeper practice. Also, I'm 43, like my body doesn't do what it did when it was 25. So that also connects to sex. So really it was about like, how long could I stay in this pose? How fast could I move, right? How fast can I transition? And I know, because I talk to people about sex all day, that this is how a lot of people approach sex as well, right? Like, did I show up with a hard cock? Like, was I wet enough? What, did I look good enough? Like, did I make the right noises? Does my butt look okay? Like, am I doing it right? Am I gonna have an orgasm? Am I close to orgasm? Like, there's so much of this kind of performance aspect to sexuality. And again, when we focus on the breath and the intention, it really can change our practice. This also requires us to rethink our entire understanding of sex. And not everyone, but a lot of people, and especially heterosexual partnerships, kind of get stuck in routines where it's like sex is just the one thing. We put one penis and one vagina, and then, maybe one or both people have an orgasm, and then we're done. Most couples have sex for an average of like 5 to 7 minutes. And once we start to learn more about anatomy and physiology, which is another lecture, that is just not enough for most people with vulvas to get even slightly aroused. And it's also not going to give you that like connecting practice. Maybe you have an orgasm. So again, if we think of orgasm as like the end goal or the performance goal, maybe you checked that box, but like, where is the connection? Like, where is the breath? Where is the eroticism in that, right? We're checking off a list item on our to-do list, or we're making sure we have an orgasm just because we feel anxious and we want to come. Great. Sometimes we need to have sex like that. And also, like, what if we dropped into the beingness of it and not the performance of it, right? And sometimes, again, we just need that, right? Sometimes if I've had a stressful day, I really need to go to yoga and just, like, do all the things and like do all the push-ups and like do all the, flowy, like expansive stuff that I want to do because I need to burn off that energy. And like sometimes a quickie is great, right? I'm not saying don't have quickies, but most of the time, most of us benefit from slowing the fuck down, especially because so many of us are multitasking all day, every day. There's dozens of tabs open on our desktops and our browsers. There's hundreds of tabs open and apps open on our phones. There's not, we're rushing to get to this and rushing to get to that. And most of us don't have time to slow down and time to breathe and time to really drop into our practice and or drop into our sex. So sometimes that fast is good. Sometimes really nice to slow down. And when we slow it down, either sex or yoga, we start to, again, have access to that depth, right? And this was one of the big transitions I felt, was like, I can squish myself into, whatever kind of side bend or whatever. But what if, and this is the practice I invite you in, if you're a yoga practitioner, or even if you do martial arts or running or, weightlifting, whatever it is that your practice is, like, slow it down. Because when we slow it down, when we don't use the momentum to lift our weights or to, move through a yoga pose, we don't use the constriction. We let ourselves maybe just go halfway. What would it be like if I only did this pose halfway? Where are the new muscles? Where is the sensation? Where can I breathe a little bit deeper into this? And same thing with sex. What if we changed how we do sex just for a couple of minutes, just to see, what would it be like if I only put my finger halfway inside my vagina? Or what if I only stroked myself to half hardness and not full erection? What if I just stayed in that softer place and just was curious about what might come up? The one thing I do want to say is, oftentimes when we slow down, we make space for more emotion. And I had a friend who said, "Oh, I love sculpt classes. It's so great." And meanwhile, her nervous system is just like frazzled. I said, "You should go to yin. Go to a still, like a restorative yoga class." I said, "I can't. I'll cry." Yes, like that is the point. And so much of this mindful sex and the tantric work that I do and that I do with my beloved involves a lot of fucking crying. We had this beautiful, expansive sexual play the other day, and I was sobbing the entire time. and I had these huge orgasms and I was sobbing the entire time. So there is no like limit to kind of the depth and also the emotion that can emerge when we slow down. And sometimes that can be really uncomfortable. And I invite you in to the discomfort because that is where your growth edges are. When we get through the grief or the mourning or the anger, then we have access to more pleasure. Your grief is a gateway. Your tears are a gateway. Your frustration is a gateway. So there may be tears if you slow down. Just be aware of that. Point number 2 I want to make is really about embodied yoga or embodied sex. So I kind of touched on this a minute ago, but like when we show up, how are we showing up? Right? Are we frazzled? Are we checking our phones before yoga class? Are we like on Instagram until the teacher says, okay, let's get started? Are we on Instagram right after? Are we letting our brains and our task mind, our monkey mind kind of take control? Or are we allowing ourselves to drop in? And again, when we drop in, there might be some discomfort, there might be some emotion, there might be something moving that we aren't aware of on the conscious level. It's the same thing with sex, right? So many people say, I want to want it more. I want more desire. I want to be able to like have sex more often, right? I want to be able to prioritize it. But the thing is, like our bodies are not light switches. We cannot go from making dinner, putting the kids to bed, doing homework, checking email, taking out the rubbish, and then being like, okay, great, now I'm ready, right? I just showed my love the business time. If you've ever seen the Flight of the Conchords business time, it's really like you've got to take out the recycling. And I know you're wearing your college t-shirt, but like I know it's business time, right? We cannot, for the most part, really switch in that way. We need to make space. And one of the ways we make space is really starting in our bodies. Maybe that means you get home and you take 10 minutes to take a long shower, body oil, shower gel, you feel your skin, you let yourself relax. You can think about visually, metaphorically washing off the day and physically washing off the day. You can think of sitting across from your beloved and holding hands for 5 minutes. We use timers all the time in our relationship. Set a timer for 5 minutes and we breathe together, or we hold hands, or we snuggle, or we stare into each other's eyeballs. Those types of practices can help you drop in. And it can be really hard at first. Again, when we sit with that stillness, it can bring up a lot. When we do an eye gazing practice, sometimes I'm boom in it, in love, just the most beautiful man is sitting in front of me and I see all of his divine nature. And sometimes I'm like, oh, I gotta go grocery shopping and I gotta prepare for the event and I forgot to send that email. And it like let that come up, like let your mind spin and then just come back to the practice, come back to the eye gazing, come back to the breathing, come back to a body scan, right? You can do this right now. And I invite you to do this in this moment, as long as you're not driving. Just feel your butt on the chair, on the bed, on the floor, wherever you might be sitting, and just notice. How do your butt cheeks feel? How do your muscles feel? How do your hips feel? Where are your legs and your feet in space? Maybe I see some people shifting around. Awesome. One of my favorite yoga nidras, which is like the sleep time yoga, says make yourself 5% more comfortable. That might be putting on some lip balm. It might mean taking a sip of water. It might mean shifting your butt. It might mean snuggling with your partner or disentangling, right? Paying attention to what is happening in your body is a practice. And when we start to tune in, we might notice, oh, like my legs were crossed. And as soon as I said, okay, feel your butt, I uncrossed my legs. I put my feet on the ground. And now I feel this energy kind of in my center column, feeling much more aligned and I feel more calm, right? So the small adjustments, like tune into those, tune into the breath, do a body scan. You can make a body scan 1 minute, you can make a body scan 10 minutes. Just checking in. Where is my head? Where is my mouth? Where is my heart? Where are my arms? How are my muscles? Am I feeling nervous? Am I feeling tension? You put your hands on your low belly, the part that we always try and keep really hard, that should actually be really soft, and just under your belly button. What does your belly want to do? I wear a lot of really tight yoga pants because they make my ass look great, but they don't let my belly breathe. I have soft pants on today and I can really feel my softness. Ah, what if we showed up to sex like this? In tune, slowed down, very present, and curious about what might come up. I invite you to bring that into your play. The other thing you can do, especially if you're playing with somebody else, is really practice tuning into them. Where is their breath? How is their heart rate? We had a bit of a struggle the other night, and I was laying, my beloved was my little spoon, I was big spoon, and his heart was just going crazy. And I couldn't down regulate with him. I couldn't connect with him, right? And he got out of bed because he had to down regulate on his own. Can I tune into my partner? Notice their heart, notice their breathing. Where, are they feeling scattered? Are they feeling stressed about something? One of the things we often do is we say, having this intrusive thought, I forgot that email, or I'm thinking about that thing that we said earlier, or I feel my belly really hurts. I have gas, I'm bloated. How do I tune into that and honor it and say, okay, like this might not feel good, but I'm present with it, right? Embodiment is like this constant, like re-awareness, like reimagining, right? Reimagining of who we can be in this exact moment. You can tune into your partner's breath and their scent. I'm a very like sensual driven person. So for me, it's how does my partner smell? I love his hair gel. I love the way his armpits smell, his chest, his mouth, right? Like, can you tune in to those aspects of your partner? I see some people giggling about that. Awesome. Can we really breathe together? One of the deepest practices I offer people is open mouth alternate breathing. And we'll demo this next month when we redo our erotic thread workshop. But it's basically him exhaling into my mouth and me inhaling, and then me exhaling into his mouth and him inhaling. And oral hygiene is very important in this household for lots of reasons, but that's one of them. And that asynchronous breath, where he is literally giving me his energy and I am giving him mine, is one of the most like intense embodied experiences that we can do. And for me, might not be this for you, it is like the quickest way to drop me into my body and drop me into my erotic energy. So we'll talk about that one next month, and we'll offer a demo of that practice as well. But when we tune into each other, when we tune into ourselves and when we tune into each other, and there's a balance, right? We have to do both to be good lovers, to be good partners. It's a dance, right? I tune into him. How is his breath? Is he present? Is he in pleasure? Can I do something to amplify or reduce the pleasure based on what I'm sensing? And then I tune into me. Where am I feeling it? Am I feeling it am I uncomfortable? Do I need to shift? Do I need to say something? Do I need some water? Do I need to take a break? Whatever that might be. So the third point is layering on an aspect of mindfulness, right? So if you have a meditation or a mindfulness practice, you know that our minds are designed to wander, to be frustrated, to be multitasked, to be, for me, it's always thinking about what's for dinner, what's on the grocery list. That is like my go-to thing I'm worried about. I really love to cook, so it's not a stressor. It's just like a thing I'm always thinking about. We know that our mind is going to do this. So how do we bring it back? Like, oh, I'm thinking about that thing again. How do I come back? What's happening in my body? Right? Oh, my mind wandered again to that email I should have written differently. Oh, how can I come back? Right? For some people who've never practiced meditation or mindfulness, it's like, oh, my brain is too busy. I could never do that. Like, that is the point. Your brain is busy. That's what it's supposed to do. And when we start to practice mindfulness in a very broad capacity, right? Whether you're sitting on a meditation cushion or meditating in the forest or in a yoga class in the last 5 minutes of Shavasana, or in a solo, for me, meditation is usually staring at the sky or staring at the ocean. It's not actually kind of sitting on a cushion and doing that. Can we bring ourselves back, right? And this, again, brings it into yoga, right? How present are we with what is happening? Are you moving through the motions and are you in your body? Or are you moving through the motions and worried about that email and worried about that text you sent that the person didn't reply, and like, oh my God, they must hate me. And like, oh, like I should have said that to my mom when she was so mean to me. Like literally whatever comes up in your brain during practice, during sex, like all of those are going to happen. And we just bring it back, right? And again, the number one way to bring it back is to bring it back to your breath. Am I breathing? First of all, you are breathing. Breath is really cool, and that it's like an automatic thing, but it's also a conscious thing. So if we forget to breathe, we're still breathing, right? We're not going to die. That's pretty awesome. Thank you, bodies. And we can also kind of take control of our breath. And one of the ways we can do that, and you can do this again with me right now, put your hand on your low belly. And I like to put one hand on my heart as well. And I feel the breath in all of these spaces in my body. And I breathe into my low belly, up into my heart. And what does that do? Even with one or two breaths of that grounding energy. And some of the work that I do with my clients is to really learn how to expand that energy, not just between your heart and your belly, but how do we bring it all the way through our energy centers, all the way up to our crown chakra, into our third eye or pineal, into our throat, our hearts, our solar plexus, which is just below your rib cage, our bellies, and then also into our sex, right? Our root chakra and our sacral chakra, that is the connection, that is the safety, that is the relationships, the community. And it is also in our sacral chakra, our sexual energy. So what happens when we start to move energy and breath into our genitals? And likewise, move the breath from the genitals into the heart, into our throat, right? So a full practice of kind of energetic and chakra-based breathing is not quite what we're doing today, but I just want to invite you into that wisdom of like, when we focus on sex, we often focus just on the genitals, but we can move that energy into every part of our body. We can have orgasms that are non-touch orgasms, non-genital touch orgasms. You can have breath orgasms. You can have energy orgasms. You can have cervical orgasms or prostate orgasms or nipple orgasms. Like the possibilities are endless when we learn to tune in into the sensation and into the breath. And we do that by constantly bringing it back and just noticing, hey, I feel really scattered right now. Can you help me breathe? I feel really scattered right now. I need to take a few breaths by myself at the office or while driving or whatever. Bring it back to the breath. So number 4, and this is the last point we'll talk about, and I talked about this in the very beginning when I was talking about the restorative yoga, slowness and stillness. These are two of the most important aspects of sex that I invite people to explore. Because again, when we think about how we've been taught to have sex, what we see in porn, what we see in romantic comedies or dramas where people are like hate fucking each other, you know, we see this model of what we call spontaneous desire, which is like, I see you, boom, we're making out, and then we're having sex like 2 minutes later. For some people, that really works. And again, if that is what you like, awesome. I'm not going to yuck that for you. And I invite you to slow it down. And one of my favorite teachers that I ever worked with gave us this mantra is whatever you are doing, whether you are touching someone, whether you are having sex with someone, whether you're penetrating or receiving penetration, whether you're kissing or stroking someone's hair or giving a massage, slow it down and then slow it down by half. And when you take that small direction, that small mantra, you can literally transform anything that you're doing. This does not mean that you can never go fast. Sometimes there is time where I really want a lot of movement. I really want a lot of in and out. I really want a lot of stimulation. But when we explore both sides of this, right, we don't always have to go fast. We can also go slow. When we explore that, we open up, again, that space for whatever needs to move. Not only do we separate sex out from mental health care and self-help, we also separate out emotions from sex in a lot of ways, right? Like I was saying, we had this incredibly intense experience where I was like sobbing the whole time, and that might freak a lot of people out. Like it takes a special kind of lever to be able to hold all of that, right? So it is a practice for you and your partners to really understand, like if we when we start practicing slowness in our sex, like stuff is going to come up. How do we both learn to hold that and not make it more than anything than just like waves flowing through you, right? Something needs to move, and we're going to let it move. And one of the things you can do is, again, slow it down and then slow it down by half. And I invite you to try this today with whatever type of touch is available to you, whether you are going to do a self-pleasure practice, even just taking a shower, right? How can I wash my hair more slowly? How can I shave my legs or wash my arms or my armpits more slowly? How can I just slow it down and just be curious? If you are going to make love today or self-pleasure, how can you slow that down? If you always have sex a certain way, so if you have a vulva and you like your vibrators, great, awesome. How can you start? Maybe you start with your breasts or your hair or your face. Maybe you warm up your vulva with just some external massage. I just got vulva puppets. I forgot to bring them out, but maybe you warm yourself up with some external massage and then you use the vibrator, right? So toys are tools and they're awesome. And also sometimes when we rely on our tools too much, we forget that we have a lot of power in the analog as well. So if you have a penis and you normally touch yourself really hard and really fast, like try using your other hand or try doing it in the shower with a shower gel and a little bit of a different sensation. Maybe you arouse yourself a little bit and then back off, right? We don't always have to go for that like performance aspect. So the slowness is super important too, especially if you've gotten into some routines. And again, this happens a lot with long-term heterosexual partners, not exclusively. I definitely have queer couples who have really similar challenges in that we kind of get into a routine. I do this, you do this, I go down on you, you go down on me, and then we put something in something and then we go through this. And again, there is nothing wrong with that. I have a partner with a penis. I love penetration. It's awesome. And also, it's often not enough for people with vulvas to really experience a depth of pleasure. So I invite you to not skip the foreplay or the what Dr. Ian Kerner calls the core play, right? Because the things that we consider foreplay for people with vulvas are the things that usually really turn us on and really bring us into arousal, but often we skip them. So I invite you not to skip it. And one of the ways you can kind of play with this is saying, like, we're not going to have penetrative sex. I'm not going to put my penis inside your vagina. I'm not going to put my penis inside your bum, whatever your go-to practice is. We're just going to play with outer course. We're just going to play with touch and kisses and maybe some oral sex and just see what happens, right? Doesn't mean you can't ever have penetrative sex again. It's a way to just explore this. How do we do this? And how do we do this more slowly? How do we move through our sex routine in a different way? So focusing on slowness might really seem counterintuitive because for some people, slowness, some people need the speed or the intensity of like a vibrator or something to really like get there. And that's great. Some of us, our orgasms are more elusive than others. And I invite you to be curious about why that is. Again, are we rushing into sex because it's something we feel like we have to do? Are we rushing into sex because we don't know how to do it slowly? Are we rushing through something and kind of forcing our bodies to do the thing? Like, yes, I know I can use my vibrator and get off right away, but does my body need something else? Right. And so to tie that back into yoga, it's like kind of going into yoga without really knowing where your body's at. I remember I moved to San Francisco for a while and I would go to yoga and I would just do yoga like normal. And my back was like killing me all the time. And I'd never had back problems before. It's because it was so cold in San Francisco coming from sunny Honolulu. So knowing that I could not do the same practice in the same way because my body was literally not warmed up was just information. Knowing that I needed to find a warmer studio, first of all, and knowing that I needed to treat my body more gently and make space for where she was in this moment, that is the wisdom that I invite you to explore. What are you rushing past in your need to get towards climax? What are you rushing into without really checking in, without really doing those body scans? And what might we be missing along the way? It's really bringing in that slowness, really bringing in that attention, and really introducing sex as connection, sex as play, sex as pleasure, and not sex as we're just going to have this orgasm. And I'm going to end this by saying one of the phrases that we learned in yoga is that it's not about touching your toes, right? If you have a yoga practice or if you're in the fitness world, you probably have heard people say, I can't do yoga, like I can't even touch my toes. It is not about touching your toes. It is about the journey on the way down. And so same with sex. Orgasms are great. I'm not going to tell anyone not to have orgasms. It's not about the orgasm necessarily. It's about what you learn on the pathway to your pleasure, to your depth. And with that, I am going to wrap it up. I want to say thank you very much to everyone who attended. I'm going to open it up to questions in the next minute. And before I close, before I stop talking and before I stop the recording, I just want to say thank you so much for being here. Please find me on Conscious City Guide or on Bloom or at AndreaBertoli.com. I offer free classes monthly for everybody like this. I offer free conscious sexuality gatherings for men once a month as well, where we have more of a circle. It's not so much me talking, it's more like, let's get together and talk about a specific subject and to just get men to open up and be vulnerable in space with each other. And it is an honor to hold space for that as well. I do in-person stuff here in Hawaii on occasion. And then I work with clients one-on-one to do individual and couples plus sessions. I was remiss in saying in the very beginning that I work with everybody, whatever your sexuality, your gender, your relationship orientation is, like you are all welcome here. I identify as bisexual and kinky and polyamorous and a tantrika. So I have my own stuff that I'm bringing to this, and I want to invite you into whatever sexual expression is most authentically yours. I hope to connect with you really soon. I just appreciate you all so much for being here and being curious about this work. So thank you so much.